Hi class. Before you watch this video, please stop and take a moment to jot down your thoughts, beliefs, fears, stereotypes, basically the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear Arab American. Pause. Okay, let's begin a study of the Arab culture in America. Arabs are people who have ancestral links to the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, which is known to be one of the earliest foundations of civilization. This historical region has been homeland to significant religious events in Jerusalem and Mecca and volatile conflicts in Aleppo and Gaza. It is centered around the Persian Gulf and is known to English speakers as the Middle East. How and why did Arabs immigrate here? Arabs arrived in the United States in four distinct waves of immigration. The first group in the early 1900s were Christians, wanting to escape the Islamic Ottoman Empire. They were uneducated laborers and assimilated with ease due to their Christian beliefs. A second wave of Arabs came after World War II, fleeing their homeland due to the political unrest. Many were educated and thus could afford to leave. The third wave of immigrants arrived in the 1960s. At that time, U.S. restrictions on immigration had lessened, and the Arabs that arrived were again well educated, but their motivation to come to America this time was for a better life, the American dream. Also at this time was the forced occupation of Palestine by the Israelis. Many Palestinians were included in this influx to America as well. The fourth wave of Arabs were the Persian Gulf War refugees, and they had few options on their side. These were Iraqis that had assisted the U.S. in the war effort and had consequences to face if they remained there in Iraq, in their homeland. Today, 3.5 million Arabs live in America. Some statistics. According to the U.S. Bureau of the Census, this was 1990, so it'll be more than this, but 59% at that time, 59% of Arabs in America at that point were native born, so 59% were born here. 82% were U.S. citizens. 83% were proficient in the English language, and 40% had a bachelor's degree or higher. So all of these numbers should be a bit higher. The stream of recent immigrants arriving in the United States lately are less skilled, and they are mostly refugees from Iraq, Palestine, and Yemen. We'll revisit this topic again with the immigrants. I haven't included the Syrians as the Syrian refugee crisis is beyond the scope of this assignment. Culture and values. Collectivism is a value and a big part of the Arab culture. In the United States, we're raised and encouraged to eventually become independent and self-sufficient. Arab Americans tend to hold tightly to family ties and their collectivist worldview. They see themselves as an extension of their family and community. They are encouraged to rely on one another. Interdependence is a sign of loyalty and dedication to their group. A person might be asked to sacrifice their dreams and goals for the sake of the family. Because of this collective bond within groups, there may be a tendency to lean toward clannish behavior and thus cause separation between the Arab culture and others, in this case, fellow Americans. This type of society values trust, so one must make themselves trustworthy to the group, and the idea of honor and shame plays a large role in decision-making amongst families and communities. The Arab social structure is patrilineal, and so with this comes rules for women. No premarital sex, taking care of the husband and raising the children in line with their cultures and traditions are some of the guidelines. Arranged marriages do exist, but love matches are acceptable too. Parenting styles tend to be authoritarian, high on punishment, while good behavior is expected, and whatever you do, do not shame the family. Because of these beliefs and traditions, U.S. cultural values may be viewed as a threat to their ways of life. Parents may impose social restrictions on their children to prevent them from the allure of American pop culture, permissive behaviors, and problematic U.S. influences. These constraints fall more so on the females, as traditionally it is the daughters that can bring dishonor to the family, more so than the males. The elderly are valued and known as a source of stability, providing mental, emotional, spiritual physical and economic support. As a race, the Arab people have a variety of skin tones and eye color. There is no certain physical characteristic look to the Arab people. Some do have black skin, depending on their country of origin. Arabic surnames or Muslim traditional dress may be the only defining characteristics. In surveys and applications, most Arab Americans select Caucasian, non-Hispanic. In surveys, just said that. With the 2020 census approaching, some Arab Americans are asking the U.S. Census Bureau for a new category in the census to represent their classification. MENA, M-E-N-A, would be the new category, the acronym MENA being Middle East and North Africa. There is disagreement whether MENA should be listed as an ethnicity or a race, and the latest update from the Census Bureau is the decision they made is the questionnaire will ask participants who check off white to also write in their origins, and among the suggested answers will be Lebanese and Egyptian, two of the largest Middle Eastern and North African nationality groups in the U.S. So that was the compromise that the census came to with the Arab Americans. Arab youth, I'm going to briefly touch on this topic for the school counselors. There are 3 conditions by which the school setting uniquely impacts the student's Arab ethnicity and the student's identity in high school. Peer and teacher discrimination is one problem. Teacher discrimination has one of 2 impacts on the student. Either the student wants to share their cultural views and enlighten the teacher or their peers as well, or they want to minimize their identity altogether and just blend in. School curriculum treatment of Arab history and culture is a problem. It's underrepresented and misrepresented, the Arab culture in their history books. And as far as misrepresented, all that's usually mentioned is oil and terrorism. And the third, broader school structures that allow for student cultural expression. So the students want to express their cultural identity in school, and they want teachers and counselors that they can identify with. So maybe some teachers of Arab descent or teachers that share their religious values. So please look at this article if you're interested in the school counselor track. And it's a current article. It's February 2019, so it contains good information on how our identity is formed in these teen years and the struggle with family values and peer values. Okay, religion. Notably, 2/3 of Arabs in America affiliate with Christianity, as well as Arab American culture and values, and 1/3 follow Islam. So 2/3 Christian, 1/3 Islam. Excuse me. According to the Pew Research Center, as of 2015, in the region of MENA, Middle East and North Africa, 93% there are Muslim, 3.7% are Christian. And just to clarify, Muslims are people that follow Islam. Islam is the religion. So I wanted to explore Arab American women's gender role attitudes, and I include this in the religion section with the question, is it Islam that holds and enforces these gender beliefs, or is it the Arab culture? The beliefs being, as it appears, women not having the same rights and freedoms as men. So despite diversities in the immigration histories of Christian and Muslim Arabs, they share an ethnic heritage that is greatly influenced by Islamic values, especially those regarding gender roles and family relations. A misconception of Islam is that it asks women to be subservient to men. In Islam, males and females are considered equal before God. It is the local customs and leaders influenced by the socio-political influence of the particular country or region they are from intersecting with Islam. Does that make sense? So it's the influence of the particular country or region and then intersecting with Islam that puts limits on the women. For instance, when ISIS took over certain regions in the Middle East, they enforced strict rules on women that previously did not exist. This excerpt is from an article in the New York Times, December 2016. In Khazar Camp, Iraq, by the time the jihadists had finished, not even a woman's eyes were legal. Showing them was a punishable offense. The dress code imposed on the women of Mosul started soon after the Islamic State overran the city more than 2 years ago. It was carried out gradually until every part of the female body was erased, starting with the face, then the rest of the body, including the hands, which had to be covered with gloves, as well as the feet, which had to be hidden by socks. It ended with an announcement blared over loudspeakers telling women to wear a film of black cloth over their eyes. I'll have a picture of this in your handout. So this was a religious extremism enforced by men that just felt like it. Here in the U.S., the degree of religiosity varies among the Muslim people, although it is common to hear Insha'Allah, which means God willing, and other religious phrases from individuals who, whether they are very religious or not. So even the non-religious people say phrases like that regarding God. Some believe that sticking to a religious tradition is essential for maintaining an ethnic identity, and that the domestic female is fundamental for preserving and reproducing Arab culture. But others consider the religious traditions obstructive, preventing their integration and achievement in U.S. society, and thus support women's education and employment. It is the Christian Arabs that have had an easier time fitting in. This, I'm following up from the immigration issues I discussed earlier. So Christian Arabs have an easier time fitting in, as we could understand that because there are many Christians in this country. So earlier when I said, I'll bring this up here, I'm bringing it up, and sorry. It's the immigrants that are less skilled, that have not been in the U.S. very long, and the Muslim Arabs that are holding on to these cultural traditions more so. So what the research shows is the longer Arab Americans have been in America, or even more helpful, were born here, they believe less in the domesticity of women for a few reasons. The majority of native-born Arab Americans are descendants of Christians that arrived in the 1900s, as they were here seeking better economic opportunities for their families. Although they attempted to sustain the traditional gender roles, they needed the income more. So the women needed to work. So originally it was a necessity and thus evolved into more of a way of life, right? So they thought they'd hold on to their traditional values for women here, but they couldn't afford it. So the women needed to work, and it just kind of evolved into them being more independent. Arab Christians are also less likely than Arab Muslims to marry someone not of the same religion. While educated Muslims whose achievements encourage integration into the American middle class continue to hold the status of religious minority, thus making acculturation into mainstream society much more difficult. It may be their dress, if they're dressing in a traditional kind of extreme way. So some choose to reside in ethnic communities for social and psychological support. So it's the people that are holding on to their traditional cultures and values that want to be in this, more of a community with just Arab Americans, understandably so. So newer immigrants are also more likely to maintain ties with their sending countries, where traditional norms favor women's domestic roles. Again, the newer refugees are less educated and understandably may not want new traditions and freedoms that America offers. So stereotyping. Let's address the obvious. 19 terrorists from countries within the Middle East were responsible for the horrors of 9/11. So Arabs are terrorists. That's one stereotype. All Arabs are Muslims, and Muslims are radical terrorists. That's another stereotype. They hate people in the U.S. because of our standards and values, and stereotypes of Muslim women. They're all belly dancing harem girls or oppressed women dressed in cloaks and veils. So, and then you've got the camels. What's up with all the camels? Anyway, so stereotypes there. Moving on to mental health issues. So the oppression and discrimination. We have media portrayals, political tensions, overt and covert discrimination. All of these affect mental health. The oppressed and the discriminated, it's because of their language or their accent or just because they're different. Some people don't embrace differences, they fear them. We know that here in America. Acculturative stress because of new languages, new customs, adjustment to new societal structures, education, employment, government, all these things are new and a lot to adapt to. Careers from their homeland do not follow them sometimes. You know, if they could have been doctors or teachers in their old country, they come here, they have to be janitors, cab drivers, you know, who knows. They've got their children wanting to assimilate into the U.S. culture. I'm sure that's stressful. Careers concerning workplace discrimination, career concerns due to workplace discrimination, cultural adjustment at work, ethnic and gender identity development. They've got their sons and daughters wanting either to adapt to the individuation of American culture or hold on to the collectivism. Do they educate their daughters or do they marry them off? So all of these issues can affect mental health. Excuse me. Okay, psychosocial issues, PTSD from war experiences and immigrating, refugee camps. You know, were they in a camp? Were they mistreated there? Who knows what these people faced before they came here. Of course, we've got the after effects of September 11th and the U.S. view of that, sometimes confusing terrorists with all Arab Americans. Arab American psychological stress often manifests itself into somatic issues, such as pain and fatigue. For some reason, this culture is afflicted with somatizing, which is experiencing psychological distress in the form of physical ailments. Okay, counseling. How can we counsel these people? Counselors should be careful to ask about family in a broad and inclusive way due to the kinship mentality. This includes extending all families. The kinship mentality includes extended family members. So more than just a brother or sister, aunts, uncles, distant cousins, they're all inclusive. They're very close. Families are enmeshed and interdependent. Be careful not to label relationships as inappropriate or unhealthy as the client may be adhering to customs. Counselors may consider including an imam, which is a religious leader, in the sessions, which would be appreciated by the Muslim client, especially if discussing family or religion. Manners of expression and communicating style must be considered. Nonverbal gestures to express emotion and respect. Being in close proximity to the client is comforting. A loud voice and repetition in speech to emphasize a point. Calm down, calm down. Believe it or not, that is something that would calm them down. So clients may be reluctant to share and may believe it is a betrayal of a friend or family in the counseling session. Counseling strategies. You could try insight-based strategies. They may work. They may not be the most ideal technique, preferably a solution-focused or cognitive behavioral approach with these people, possibly constructivist approach, because the therapeutic work remains within the client's belief system and worldview. But if you approach in that way, if you use that technique, it says to be very careful that you have a good understanding of Islam and that you are sincere in your approach, which of course we would all try and be. Well, that's it, guys. That wraps it up. Hope it was clear. And I'll have a handout for you as well, maybe some pictures and a fun video to watch. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your week.